On the morning of my 75th birthday, I woke before the sun, the way I always do on days that matter. The apartment was quiet, the sort of quiet that feels soft rather than lonely. The scent of brown sugar and warm spices drifted through the rooms as I worked on my old sweet potato pound cake recipe, the one my mother taught me, the one I baked for every milestone of my life. My hands weren't as quick as they once were, but the dough still felt warm and familiar beneath my fingertips, almost like an old friend. The kitchen table creaked when I leaned on it. Its surface was covered in tiny scratches from decades of living, from my late husband, Daniel, repairing radios on it, from my son, Lucas, building block towers that always toppled over too soon. Now it was just me, the rolling pin, and the soft rhythm of memory. As I slid the cake layers into the oven, I caught a glimpse of the framed photo of Daniel and me standing proudly in front of the lakeside cabin we'd built together. He dreamed we'd spend our retirement there, growing roses and hosting grandkids. But life carved a different path. He passed far too early, leaving me to raise a 15-year-old boy alone. I had been a design engineer then, with plans and ambitions of my own. I wanted to travel, to see the Great Lakes, to wander through little coastal towns. I tucked all that away so Lucas could have what he needed. Every bit of strength, every spare dollar, every piece of my unclaimed life went into raising him. And even now, nearly 50 years old, he still calls me Mom, in that tone that makes me melt. Just yesterday, he'd phoned sounding worried. Mom, I really need help. The car needs a part, something important. I didn't hesitate. I withdrew almost all of my Social Security check, the one I'd planned to stretch for the rest of the month, and handed it over. You're a lifesaver, he said, barely pausing before rushing off again. I told myself it was fine. I've lived on less. Rice, beans, and routine have carried me through worse. As long as he was okay. By late afternoon, it was time to leave for the cabin, well, what used to be my cabin. My daughter-in-law, Melissa, insisted we celebrate there because my apartment was too cramped and outdated. She'd said it with a dismissive little flick of her hand, as if she were talking about an old coat someone had outgrown. Lucas didn't defend me, he just murmured that the lake house had more space. I didn't argue. They'd lived there for 15 years now, remodeled it, filled it with sleek furniture and expensive candles. Hardly any trace of Daniel remained. By the time I reached the cabin, guests had gathered, and music hummed through the rooms. I stepped inside holding the cake, the warm aroma wrapping around me like a shawl. That was when it happened, the moment that would twist the rest of the night into something unforgettable. But before we get there, if you love real emotional stories, hit subscribe, we post one every day. Nothing of Daniel's remained in that house anymore. Not the workbench he built, not the driftwood shelves we collected together, not even the old maple trees we planted when Lucas was still small. Melissa had cut those down long ago. They're messy and block the sun, she'd said. Now there was a glossy emerald lawn and a sleek fire pit you could see in magazines, beautiful, expensive, and completely foreign to me. I arrived early, groceries in hand, having taken a taxi across town. I'd spent the morning preparing appetizers, salads, little pinwheel sandwiches. It was my birthday, but I came ready to help. That's what mothers do, I suppose, even at 75. Guests began to show up around 3. Melissa greeted them at the porch, radiant in a designer dress. When she kissed my cheek, it was quick, like a formality. She smelled like expensive perfume layered over mild annoyance. Mrs. Hartley, why don't you head to the kitchen, she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. You should finish the cheese board and watch the hot dishes so they don't get cold. So I went. My birthday became another day of helping, another day of keeping the machine running behind the scenes. The kitchen didn't feel like mine, all polished marble and stainless steel, everything cold and sharp. I sliced cheese, arranged crackers, folded napkins. From the living room came clinking glasses, laughter, lively conversation. I only heard my name once. "Where's the birthday girl?" someone called. "Oh, she's our little kitchen helper," Melissa chimed brightly. "Keeping things moving." Laughter followed. I carried out trays, replaced empty ones, wiped spills. No one offered me a seat. I felt like background furniture, necessary but unnoticed. At one point, I eased myself onto a chair a few feet away from the cluster of guests. The topic had shifted to the house, my house. One of Daniel's old friends, Eli Donovan, pointed toward the window. "I remember when Daniel and Margaret planted that pine tree out there," he said. "Didn't think it'd survive the first winter. Look at it now." His voice softened something in me. I nodded. "We buried a little keepsake under it. Lucas was just a baby. Wrapped it in a—" "Oh, Dad, not the old stories again," Melissa cut in, turning toward her father. "We're thinking of going to Turks and Caicos next year," she continued, bright and confident. "The beaches there are unbelievable. And the service? So much nicer than old trees and mosquitoes." In an instant, the conversation drifted toward resorts, flight packages, and ocean views. My tiny treasure, a bit of broken glass, 3 marbles, and a rusty quarter, lay forgotten under that pine, just like the memory itself. A heavy tightness formed in my chest. I slipped quietly back into the kitchen, grateful for the excuse to be unseen. Then came the moment everything broke. Time for the cake. My sweet potato pound cake, the one I'd poured myself into since dawn. The layers were soft, soaked gently in cream cheese frosting. I'd topped it with shaved chocolate and pecans, shaping the number 75 with my unsteady hands. I placed it on the large platter Daniel and I bought for our 25th anniversary. It was a piece of my heart, the last piece I knew how to offer. I carried it into the living room, hoping, praying, someone would feel what it meant. The room hushed as I set it in the center of the table. Melissa's voice sliced through the air. "Margaret, why would you bring that?" she said loudly, her tone thick with disdain. "We already bought a real cake from the bakery. No one's going to eat this homemade thing." A stunned silence followed. My throat tightened, but before I could speak, Eli stepped forward. "Now hold on," he said warmly. "Margaret's pound cake is the taste of childhood. That's what tradition is. I'll have a slice, actually, make it 2. That word, tradition, set Melissa off. I saw it in the way her jaw locked, in the fury that flashed in her eyes. To her, it was an insult, a stain on the perfect modern image she worked so hard to present. In one swift motion, she snatched the platter from the table. "Tradition belongs in a museum," she hissed. And in front of everyone, friends, neighbors, family, she flipped the platter, sending my cake, my effort, my memory, straight into the trash can by the wall. "We're celebrating the future." Silence. Total, breathless silence. The kind that rings in your ears. The night had changed, and so had everything else. The only sound in the room was the soft, sickening thud of the cake hitting the bottom of the trash can. Forks froze mid-air. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every pair of eyes traveled from the ruined cake to me. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I looked at my son, the child I had raised alone, poured my life into. I waited. Just one word from him. One sign of decency. One flicker of the boy who used to bring me dandelions in his fist, proud and smiling. Lucas stood. His face was flushed, his jaw tight. He looked at the guests' stunned expressions, then at Melissa's victorious smirk. And instead of defending me, he turned on me, the easiest target in the room. His fingers shook as he pointed. "Look what you've done," he shouted, his voice cracking with anger. "You embarrassed us. Everyone is sick of you. You can't act normal. Get out. Do you hear me? Get out. Everyone is tired of you. The words didn't stab, they cut clean through. Something inside me didn't shatter. It detached. Like a thin, over-pulled wire finally giving way without sound. 50 years of hoping, excusing, forgiving, all of it simply went still. My ears buzzed with a single, high, unwavering note. A strange calm settled over me, sharp and absolute. I looked at my son's distorted face and realized with perfect clarity. This wasn't my cake. This wasn't my home. This wasn't my burden anymore. I nodded once. Small, steady, final. Then I turned away. I didn't look at Lucas. I didn't look at Melissa. I didn't look at the guests who suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. I walked toward the foyer. My body moved on its own, as if following a path carved long ago and rediscovered at last. I took my light trench coat from the hook and buttoned it, 1, 2, 3, each button neat and deliberate. My fingers no longer trembled. I wrapped my old scarf around my neck, picked up my purse. Inside, an empty wallet, the keys to my tiny apartment, and a folded handkerchief. Enough. Without a word, I opened the front door, stepped into the cool evening air, and closed it quietly behind me. The soft click of the latch sounded like the end of a sentence that had taken decades to write. I walked down the long gravel driveway toward the road. The sky was turning violet. Streetlights lit patches of worn fence, a lilac bush bending in the wind. Everything looked distant, like scenery passing on the other side of a window. A bus wheezed to a stop. I climbed aboard and took a seat by the window. The vinyl was cold beneath my palms. As the bus lurched forward, tree silhouettes and glowing windows drifted by, reflections sliding across the glass. And inside my mind, something precise and cool began sorting through the past, not in anger, but in cold accounting. Facts. Rows and shelves of facts. Fact 1, my gold pendant. The one Daniel gave me for my 30th birthday. Heavy, warm, with a small carved swirl. 5 years ago, it vanished. I tore apart every drawer looking for it. I even cried quietly into my pillow. 6 months later, there it was, hanging around Melissa's neck in a vacation photo she posted online. She was laughing, sunlit, wearing my pendant like it had always been hers. When I asked, she shrugged and said, "Oh, I found it at an antique shop." Crazy coincidence, right? I knew the truth. I said nothing. Fact 2, the money. How many times had I emptied my savings for them? The down payment on their car. Repairs to my lake house roof. Tutors for my granddaughter. Meanwhile, I ate yogurt and bread for weeks so they could fly to Turks and Caicos to decompress. They never asked me to come. Not once. I told myself that helping them was love. That love didn't need to be returned. Fact 3, the slow removal of me from their lives, and from my own home. First, my photos were moved from the living room to the hallway. Later, the hallway to a closet. Eventually, they couldn't find them. The bus rattled on. The high note in my mind softened into steady, icy clarity. This wasn't grief. This was awakening. Then came the little things, the small cuts that accumulate until they finally bleed you dry. My favorite mug, the one I always used when I visited, was accidentally broken. Lucas stopped calling me Mom in front of certain people, opting instead for the stiff, formal, Mrs. Hartley, as if erasing the word might erase the bond. Each change was like someone slowly sanding away an old engraving to etch a newer, shinier one in its place. The bus lurched over potholes, jostling me from side to side. My reflection stared back from the dark window, an aging woman in a simple coat, her face lined with years of quiet endurance. Behind her, like a shadow, trailed decades of swallowed words and unreturned affection. A lifetime spent loving in one direction. But tonight, I had reached the end of that road. The sign was clear: get out. A son's wish. And I granted it, exactly as he demanded. That night, I slept better than I had in ages, deep, dreamless, peaceful. No churning thoughts, no lump in my throat. It felt as if a weight I had carried for so long I no longer recognized it as a burden had suddenly vanished. Morning sunlight poured onto my quilt, warm and bright. The air in my tiny apartment felt different, as though someone had opened a window inside my chest. I rose slowly, washed my face, brewed a cup of coffee. My movements were calm, but there was a new current beneath them, purposeful, steady. I didn't write a plan. I didn't need one. I knew. From the back of my wardrobe, I pulled out a worn cardboard folder tied with string. Inside were all the documents that marked the milestones of a life: my marriage certificate, Daniel's death certificate, and at the very bottom, a thick, crisp deed. I traced my finger along the typewritten line. Owner, Margaret Hartley. Type of ownership, sole and exclusive. There was a seal in the corner, and it jolted a long-buried memory awake. I was 35. A year after losing Daniel. Lucas was a troubled teenager, angry at the world, and I was asked to come to the firm's headquarters in Atlanta. They offered me the position of head engineer at an advanced aerospace studio, a role far beyond anything I had ever imagined. My own lab. My own team. A fresh start. I sat in a glass-walled office, holding the appointment letter. Instead of focusing on the opportunity before me, all I could see was my son's face. I imagined him alone in our small apartment, drifting further from me. I imagined the lake house Daniel and I had built, slowly falling into disrepair. And I knew I couldn't uproot him. I couldn't uproot us. I declined. For Lucas. I poured everything, my potential, my skill, my ambition, into keeping that house, keeping him grounded, keeping our life afloat. The same house from which I was thrown out the night before. The memory wasn't painful now. It clicked neatly into place, the final puzzle piece in a picture I had been avoiding for years. I set the deed on my table and picked up the phone. The first number I dialed belonged to a real estate office I'd seen in the newspaper. A chipper man answered on the first ring. Good morning, Premier Realty. How may I assist you? Hello, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. My name is Margaret Hartley. I'd like to list my lake house for immediate sale. The property on Maplewood Drive, Lakeview Shores. Of course, Mrs. Hartley. When would be a good time for an inspection and appraisal? Today, I said. The gate key is under the large stone to the left of the driveway. All documents are ready. Understood. We'll take care of it right away. I hung up, calm as still water. Then I dialed the second number, the only one who had always been honest with me. My oldest friend, Donna Wells, who'd sat beside me in engineering classes decades ago. She was the only one who ever truly saw my family for what it was. Margaret, she answered, her warm, scratchy voice bursting through the line. Happy birthday, old friend. I called yesterday, you must have been celebrating. How was the party? I listened to her cheerful tone. And then, with no tremor, no anger, just simple truth, I told her exactly what had happened: the cake, the trash can, and my son's voice screaming in my face. Silence stretched across the line, long and heavy, before Donna finally exhaled. About time, she said, no pity, no theatrics, just steady relief. Margaret, I've been waiting 20 years for you to draw a line. They confused your kindness with permission. Now tell me, what comes next? Her bluntness steadied me. The lake house goes on the market this afternoon, I answered, my voice as calm as the steam rising from my coffee. Donna let out a satisfied laugh. Good. Excellent. Now hear me, they'll call. They'll rant. They'll swear you're destroying the family legacy. Don't pick up. Let the for sale sign do the talking. It'll speak clearer than you ever needed to. All right, Donna. Hold firm, my friend. You're finally choosing yourself. When I hung up, the quiet that followed wasn't hollow, it was clean, like the air right after a storm. Everything inside me settled. No doubts. No echoes of last night. Just stillness. The days that followed were unlike anything I'd known in years. The phone sat on the dresser like a stunned animal, mute, waiting. I knew exactly what was running through their heads. She's upset. She'll calm down. She always does. Then I would show up with a tin of biscuits and an apology folded into my posture. That old cycle, decades of it, had finally rusted to a stop. I wasn't waiting this time. I was living. I woke early, stretched the joints I'd ignored for too long, and dusted off the exercise routine I abandoned somewhere in my 50s. At the store, I didn't reach for the cheapest brand out of habit, I bought what I actually liked. A revealing little freedom. From the hall closet, I pulled out knitting needles I hadn't touched in decades. I started a simple, sturdy scarf. No pattern, no frills. Just the gentle click of needles, stitch by stitch, row by row, something warm created only for myself. On the outside, nothing about my life looked different. But inside, everything had shifted. I was no longer orbiting anyone's needs. I was Margaret again, wholly, quietly, unquestionably. I imagined the realtor's arrival at the lake house, the same house Daniel and I had poured our last hope into. I pictured him stepping onto Melissa's immaculate lawn, tapping a for sale sign into the ground with a few clean strikes. That sign was my answer to all of them. My final sentence. My freedom. On the third afternoon, the storm broke. The phone erupted, shrieking, insistent, nearly rattling itself off the dresser. Lucas called. Then Melissa. Then Lucas again. I stayed in my chair, knitting. The machine wailed, I didn't. They weren't calling to apologize. They wanted control, an explanation, a reversal, the old hierarchy restored. But those scaffolds had collapsed. I had no intention of rebuilding them. By evening, I heard tires on gravel. Doors slamming. Footsteps. Of course they came. I didn't stand. Didn't smooth my hair. Didn't rehearse defenses. The sharp scrape at the keyhole made me pause. They hadn't even knocked, they used their copy as if it was their right. That tiny, metallic sound was the last confirmation I needed. I'd made the correct choice. The door burst open. Melissa's face was blotched red from fury, Lucas looked pale and lost, as if the world had shifted without warning. They froze when they saw me, calm, knitting needles moving steadily, yarn pooling in my lap like a quiet declaration. This wasn't the scene they expected. No pleading. No tears. No mother desperate to be forgiven for existing. Melissa lunged first, her voice sharp enough to cut tile. Have you lost your mind? She snapped. What is this stunt? You're sabotaging us. Destroying your own son's life, your grandchildren's lives. How could you do something so selfish? I let my needles click. Row after row. Stitch after stitch. The rhythm steadied my heartbeat. They were only now discovering who I really was. I didn't say a word at first. I simply raised my eyes and looked, not at Melissa's twisted expression, but straight through it. Beneath the fury, I saw something raw and unmistakable, fear. Not fear of me. Fear of losing the comfortable little kingdom she'd constructed with my sacrifice as its foundation. Lucas stepped in then, using the tone that used to melt me, soft, wounded, manipulative in that gentle way he never acknowledged. He moved closer. "Mom, what's going on? Why are you doing this?" His voice trembled with practiced sorrow. "Is this because of the cake?" "I'm sorry. Melissa went too far. But this is our home. Where are we supposed to go? Where will the kids go?" That word "our" echoed like a cracked bell in the quiet room. Our home, where I played cook and maid, where I was treated like clutter, where love was something expected only one way. Our home, that I paid for, maintained, protected. I let them talk themselves into exhaustion. Their pleas tangled with outrage, their voices rising and falling until they finally sputtered out. I watched Lucas's face, familiar, desperate, and felt nothing. No ache. No instinct to soothe. Something in me had emptied completely on that birthday night, and all that remained now was clarity, cold, precise, and steady. When the last word faded, I placed my knitting on the side table, careful not to lose a stitch. Only then did I speak. "This is not your home." Both of them flinched, as if the air itself struck them. "This property is mine," I went on, calm as still water. "You've lived here rent-free for 15 years. I never asked for money. I never asked you to contribute to anything. I only gave." "But I'm your son," Lucas stammered. "You're my mother." His final card. His last refuge. I tipped my head slightly, letting him see the expression he'd never bothered to imagine on my face, one free of the softness he'd relied on. "The same mother you were sick of. The mother who embarrassed you. The mother you told to get out. Remember those words, Lucas. You asked me to leave." He staggered back as if I'd slapped him. "And I am finally granting your request," I said. My voice didn't rise, it didn't need to. Steel speaks softly. "I am leaving, completely. Everything tied to me leaves with me. The lake house, the savings, the security you took for granted. If you don't need me, you don't get anything of mine." They stared at me like they were seeing a ghost instead of the woman they'd used for years. Melissa's mouth opened, then nothing came out. Lucas only gulped at the air, stunned. I stood from the armchair. "The sale is already in motion. The agent has instructions. Showings will start soon. You'll need to allow access. And you have 30 days to find a place and move your things." There was nothing else to say. I walked past them and stood at the window, looking out at the old bench where Daniel and I used to sit in the evenings. I didn't turn around, but I felt it, their world collapsing behind me. A world built on my silence. Mine, finally, was just beginning. They left soon after, confusion and rage swirling behind them like a storm cloud. And I felt nothing. Only peace. I went to the phone, gripped the cord, and pulled it from the wall. No more begging. No more shouting. No more apologies demanded of me. The next weeks passed strangely, quietly. Distant ripples reached me now and then. Melissa's mother called twice, voice trembling, pleading for me to show mercy for the children. I answered politely, explaining I had shown mercy for decades. It was their turn. After her second call, I stopped answering. Then one afternoon, Donna phoned. Her voice held sympathy, steady, warm, but not a trace of judgment. She never needed explanations. Donna's voice wavered just slightly, the way it did when she wasn't sure how much truth to spill. "I saw Melissa at the county health clinic," she said. "She doesn't look like the woman who used to post those vacation photos from Turks and Caicos. She looks worn. Older. They're saying she and Lucas ended up in a cramped rental across the county line." He's stocking shelves at night. She's hopping between interviews, but after a decade and a half of calling herself a house manager, no one's exactly lining up to hire her. And they're fighting, loudly, constantly. I listened, and something inside me remained perfectly still. No triumph. No cruelty. Just inevitability. An autumn leaf isn't pushed from the branch. It lets go when its season is over. That's all that was happening. They severed themselves from the roots that fed them, and the fall was theirs alone. Not my doing, just the result of choices long made. The lake house sold faster than even the realtor predicted. A young family walked in and insisted they didn't want to see anything else. A place built on my hopes in Daniel's hands would finally have people in it who appreciated it. On closing day, I sat in the agency office with a pen that glided smoothly across page after page. I watched the documents slide into neat stacks. My signature, my initials, my name. When the funds hit my account, more money than I had ever seen attached to my name, I didn't feel giddy. I felt grounded. It was weight, but in the way gold is weight. It was the accumulation of all the years I had trimmed my own life down so someone else's could be full. The first thing I did was book an appointment at the hearing center downtown. I had ignored the fading in my left ear for far too long, convincing myself it could wait. They fitted me with a discreet digital aid. And when I stepped outside and flicked it on, the world burst open. Leaves cracking softly under my shoes. A bird high up, singing in a tone I had forgotten existed. The gentle buzz of the power lines overhead, like the world humming to itself. I stood there on the sidewalk and cried, not because of sadness, but because I'd been returned to myself. Next, I did something I had never once allowed. I bought beauty for no reason but wanting it. A coat, royal blue, deep and luminous, the exact shade of the river at dusk. Utterly impractical. Absolutely perfect. I tried it on. It wrapped around me like a promise. I bought it without hesitation. Walking down the street in that coat, I felt taller. Not younger, just fully alive, present in my own skin. Then, finally, I reached for the dream Daniel and I had tucked away for someday. I booked a 10-day Great Lakes cruise, from Chicago to Mackinac Island. We'd planned it once, long ago, right before all our savings were swallowed by Lucas's tutoring bills. "That's all right, Margaret," Daniel had said. "Our boy needs it more. We'll go another year." But we never did. So I went for both of us. Before departure, I did something else, something just for me. I enrolled in an introductory textile design course at the community college. The idea lit something inside me. Fabric, color, pattern, creation. It felt like returning to a language I once spoke fluently. And now, here I am. Standing on the deck of a gleaming ship, the wind tugging at my new scarf, my blue coat warm around my shoulders. The shoreline drifts by, pines, church spires, little towns with white docks. The water stretches out in every direction, a moving field of silver and blue. In my hands is a fresh sketchbook. I open to the first blank page. Colored pencils rest against my palm. I watch the ripples catch the light, and my hand begins to move, soft curves, overlapping like the currents below the hull. There is no bitterness in me. No leftover anger, no lingering ache. Just this moment. This wind. This water. This quiet, expansive peace that feels deeper than the lake. For 75 years, my world was confined to a small apartment and the corners of a kitchen in a house I paid for but never truly lived in. I gave away my time, my stability, my love, piece by piece. They dropped it all on the floor like that ruined cake. But I did not rebuild the ruins. I walked away. And from the ground up, I began crafting a life that belongs entirely to me. Thank you for staying with me through the end of this journey. If this story moved you, Feel free to like and share your experiences in the comments, whether you or someone you love has faced similar disrespect. Your support matters. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Be well.